Okay, it looks like we are live. Hope so.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's just wait a couple more, maybe a few more minutes for the other folks, and I think that we should start, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Makes sense.
Yeah, and let us know if you can hear us. Okay. Oh, Jesus. Okay. And in the meantime, maybe I will adjust the microphone a little bit, so it will be maybe something like this. Okay, we already have someone. George, hello.
Hey guys.
Yeah, hello. Thanks for joining us today. Hopefully, you will not regret this after. Yeah, your dog is quite active. Yeah, maybe he'll join us. Your dog. Huh? This is actually a quite fun fact, right? That you named your dog Fabio after the load balancer from the eBay.
Yeah.
Or maybe that
After
was a
this-
coincidence, yeah, but it just makes sense,
Mhm.
right?
No, because he's Italian Greyhound, so it's also the Italian name. So it's a perfect mix of IT and Italian name.
Yeah. So we make the fun that actually the next dog you should name the console, right? So to make it the perfect match.
Few ideas in mind.
Yeah. That's kind of nerdy, but yeah. Okay, we already have someone else. Yeah, so Chima, hello, Diego, Andrew.
Hey guys.
Hello guys. Yeah.
Let me send a link to the board once again before we start.
Oh, for the Miro, yeah. Yeah, it's reasonable. I think your dog needs to run. He's a runner, right?
After, yeah. But he's closed, far away.
That's kind of weird, yeah. Or maybe it's the winter, which is depressing. I don't know. For such an active dog, yeah. What's the? Oh, wait. Okay, I need to adjust here. Okay. I think that we can start at some point, right?
Yeah. So let's begin.
Yeah. Let me just switch this to my
Mm-hmm. So today we have a plan to actually, hopefully, complete our event storming. So we're going to finish this process level that we have started in the previous second episode, and then we are just going to move to the design level. And hopefully, from the next episode, we'll start the coding. That's the plan, right?
Yeah, we'll see. I think that there's a good. Please lay your bet. Actually, this is kind of late. What the hell? I don't have the cover because it's used by my girlfriend for warming up. So, yeah, but it's more or less covered. Yeah. So the idea is to finish the process level at some point and go to the design level. I think that the design level will be more interesting because there are quite a few things to discuss, as we actually announced at the end of the previous episode. So there will be some few, I think, discussions, and hopefully you will help us to determine the best solution. So shall we start?
Yeah, let's go. So we have finished with presentations recently in the last episode, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
we have to I think there is still something's missing there, and probably at least one more subdomain, at least one more or even more.
Yeah, I think that the very first thing in here when we think about the presentations is that we had these two hotspots that comes from the big picture session, right? So we had two considerations. The first one is whether we actually have some limit when it comes to particular presentation. So we agreed that at this point we will probably create some sort of universal platform, not only for the online presentations but also for the stationary conferences. So this actually will be some sort of rule that we might, but not necessarily might fulfill, right? So we might have some limit, basically because some particular conference room might have some sort of capacity. The other one was this one. So we had this another hotspot that we would like to avoid a situation in which one participant is able to maybe sign or join or participate to two parallel sessions. So assuming that we have some sort of slots in the conference, we want to avoid the situation in which I can go to, let's say, room A and the same time to room C to two parallel sessions. We'd like to avoid this one because it's kind of not fair for the guys who really would like to stay for the whole session. So these are two things that we considered, and I think that at the process level we could maybe we could switch, maybe remove these hotspots and replace them with some sort of rule, so it'll be more clear that so it's not like some sort of consideration, but we would like to agree on something, right?
Okay, so let's start with changing the colors, maybe. So this is our rule, right?
Yeah, I don't know whether the original Alberto Brandolini had some sort of sticker color for the rule, but I think that it makes sense to make this. It will be much clearer to see the whole process, right? That we will depend on two, actually. Of course, it could be some sort of policy, but it's pretty much depends on your needs.
So at first we'll have this threshold limit rule, and then we'll have this possible conflict rule where you can't really be in parallel in different sessions. So let's call it one conflict rule or whatever. Actually,
yes, I would agree here.
Okay.
We could rearrange the domain events slightly, so the user limit reached would come either from, I think that from this one, the collision, also in here, and these two could be either the result of after we will pass these two rules, right? So something like this one. Okay, so this actually makes sense, and on the process level, it's kind of it still looks straightforward, I would say. I think that at the design level, this will be slightly more complicated, and we'll need to discuss this more. All right, so now I think that when it comes to presentations, we had two more presentation related events. So of course we had in here we call this session, but we could rename this to presentation. So the presentation started and presentation finished. In here we did not put any sort of actor that kicks off this event, but we could assume that this is like it's either the host or, as we call this, board member, maybe responsible for the particular I don't know how to call this, some sort of I don't know how this is called in English, but if you have like multi-language conferences where you have the few different technologies, you will have some sort of branches. I don't know. So each branch would represent
rooms, branches, rooms.
Rooms or branches that represent slightly different technology, or maybe slightly different part of our industry. So maybe something related to more DevOps, something more related to architecture on the .NET or something else. So to me, it's like, for now, for the simplicity's sake, I think that we could stick with either the host or the speaker who starts the presentation, and maybe this will allow everyone who joined this to actually see the actual content. So maybe this, embedded YouTube video or something. And when it comes to finishing the presentation, this will be needed to enabling the service, right? So I would like to tracks. Yeah, George. Yeah, that tracks. Tracks is the word that I was missing. Yeah, thank you. So I think that when it comes to, I'm not quite sure whether this starting the presentation will be that needed, maybe, or maybe this even doesn't have to be necessarily the command. Maybe this is like that will, based on the date time, we could modify the read model.
Actually, the presentation can be started automatically just based on some date trigger, or even say, if you go further to the technical details, like cron tab schedule, whatever. There is, let's say, 12 p.m., and you want to start the conference, start the presentation, it just produces this command and it starts. So it could be even done by some sort of internal job or whatever.
Yeah, but I think that at this point we could for now just assume that we have both this. So for starting and ending, finishing the presentation, and of course at this point we could create some sort of events that will correspond to this one, right? So presentation started, and the same would go for the presentation finished, right? Something like this one. Right. And here, okay. All right.
I'm not sure if there's still something missing within our presentations, or.
For now, I don't think so, because of course we had plenty different things, like the participant asked question, user send a question, but at this point, I think that we can basically omit this since this will be basically handled by both StreamYard and the YouTube, right? So as we are now on the StreamYard and we are streaming via the StreamYard, lots of these functionalities and this, let's call this events, are handled by this platform and also by the YouTube.
We've got one question from Giovanni: the difference between a talk and presentation. So basically, you can think of a presentation as, let's say, an instance of your talk. So you submit a talk, submit your talk, it gets approved, so submission gets approved, and then you build your, let's say, agenda based on these talks, and then when you start a presentation, you actually present your talk. So presentation is like your talk, the audience, being part of the track at a specific time, and so on, right?
Yeah, and I think that it's worth reminding that, the idea about the process level is not only to, add this and other stickers like the commands or something else like the policies. That policies actually could be included also on the big picture, but the idea is to also distill the subdomains and eventually maybe came up with some sort of bounded context, speaking about some sort of domain-driven design. And one thing, some sort of characteristics that allows you to distill the subdomains is that something becomes something another. So in our life cycle, the submission, which is sent by let's say, the potential speaker, becomes the talk, which is available, let's say, in the agenda. And these are different snapshots. Maybe submission cannot be corrected because usually it depends pretty much on the conference, but sometimes it's like I send you the submission and I'm not allowed to change it. Then I will be either rejected or approved by some sort of board member or the host of this conference. And then eventually this will become the presentation, which actually for now, we obviously could see that this will be some sort of core domain for our whole system, right? Because we already have few rules, and actually this will handle quite a lot of functionality when it comes to the whole conference system, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this will be more like supporting domains. This will be the core domain, and eventually we could think about some sort of aggregates in here. Okay.
So I think we have at least one more concept to talk about, which is the survey after the conference finishes. All of the presentations are, let's say, completed. We can start sending the survey to the participants. So I think this can be the last module.
Yeah, I think that I think that not necessarily the conference needs to be finished, because frankly speaking, I think that a lot of folks basically forgets about the answering the survey, right? Yeah. Let's say at the end of the day, especially if you have the after party, if you know what I mean. But I think that the fair, let's say, the first situation would be allowing guys to answer the particular survey right after we finish the presentation. So it's like this presentation finished event could basically allow this, right?
Yeah, so it could be like this sort of starting point for setting up the survey for this particular presentation.
Yeah, and never forget the catering. This is a good good one. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, so I think that already on our big picture, we already have something related to survey, right?
Yeah, it was at the very end. We have
okay. I can see this
answered.
Did we have anything related to creating the survey? It's like template.
No, probably not.
I think that's no. It's here. It's here. Create a survey created. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
But yeah. So it's like we create a survey, and of course at this point I truly believe that it's like survey. I'm not quite sure whether the name is correct. Whether this is some sort of survey template, because what I think about this one is like we create some sort of template. So how did you enjoy talk X by Y? And I believe that this template will be filled with the data of the particular speaker and let's say the title of the talk
but
from
the
this
survey will be the same.
Yeah. So this is more like the template, right?
Yeah,
so sort of template, and so the template would be the class, and the survey will be like the instance filled with the data, something like this one.
Like a template or a draft, whatever.
Yeah, actually like a template pattern. Jesus Christ. Okay, so I think that this would work. So let's start maybe with this too. So I could copy this one and use the power of the keyboard to copy in here. All right. George said that we should add the orange event sticky note to legend in upper left corner of the board. Yeah, we had this in here. I don't know why we don't have it in here. Kind of weird. That's the one we started with, and we don't have this on the legend. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so this one, shall I rename this to survey template? Maybe template in a
okay.
I'm not quite sure whether this naming is correct. Jesus. Okay, so create. And yeah, and of course the participants should have an ability to answer this, right?
Yeah. So something like answer survey. Let's create this one.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we have this event.
I will add the actor.
Yeah, and most likely the speaker should be able to actually see the survey answers. Of course, they will most likely be anonymous, but of course, either the speaker should have the direct insights into the survey answers, or this survey summary will be sent to the speaker by the host, one of these two. So there could be some sort of even maybe like read model for the survey after all of, let's say some time limit, maybe a day or a week after the conference, when all of the survey have been answered by the participants, you get this summary of your average scoring and so on.
Something like this one, right? And I think that this will be common for those two, for the both speaker and host. There will be no difference between
yeah, because the host wants to know how did the speaker how did it go with the speaker, so maybe they will want to have him once again in the next conference or not.
Yeah, the host will probably care more about the overall rating, so maybe that you scored, I don't know, 7 out of 10, while the speaker would probably go into more details, right? Because maybe my pronunciation was slightly off, and maybe I don't have maybe that was simply boring or trivial, or maybe that was too fast, or something common for us, right? Especially on the talks. Let's try to talk about the microservices in 25 minutes. Good luck. So I think that survey. Wait, what's the plural? I have no clue. What's the plural version? I have no clue how this is.
Service, just service.
Is it correct? I have no clue.
Let's check this.
Okay, Jesus Christ. So my English is not that great, as you see already. So something like this is probably fine. I'm pretty sure that we missed also one thing. I'm not quite sure whether this is that important, but we also had something like this, like conference price drone.
I think this should be. I think usually it's a good idea to give the prize for the participants to actually fill out the survey. This is usually one of the reasons that makes them fill out the survey. So I think maybe this let's say prize could be drawn, for example, after all of this survey has been filled by the participants. So then you can have some, let's say, random stuff doing it. Maybe there could be also, let's say, a prize or whatever for the best speaker. But I think usually the prize would be after filling the survey. Sometimes right after the talk, when you have, like, let's say 5 minutes.
Yeah, this is something that will be probably some separate thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's just now omit this one.
Okay.
The one I wanted to have is this. I think that we don't have this one. Conference finished at the very end. Because we have and we also don't have the one for the starting conference. And yet again, I'm not quite sure whether the starting and in this case the finishing will be something done automatically or not.
I mean, actually, you set up the conference date, the start date and the end date. So I'm not sure if something like start conference makes sense. For me, it's like strictly related to the time. Same with the actually starting the presentation. So
so we could so at this point it's like it does not necessarily matter. Of course, we could put this in here and maybe add some sort of icon that this is time triggered.
Mm-hmm.
So like Brandolini suggests to put the calendar, like we've done, I think, a few times already, somewhere like in here, right?
Yeah, let me copy this.
I think that also, and this was actually a good one to copy. So that would be the conference reminder sent. So like here. And this will not have the particular I think the actor itself. But we should also keep in mind about this one. And I truly believe that we also miss very obvious one related to notifications or the emails, right? So we could think about something like some sort of small notifications. Let me just put it in here. Something like notifications. And yeah, that will be something like email. I'm not quite sure that this actually is a good one. Approve. Email sent. I think that this should be more like okay, I could include this one, but we should make this clear that this will be separated module because this is the quite clearly the integration between the modules. So it will be like send an email, and not necessarily each of the module needs to be aware of the fact that we have some sort of emails, right? It's more like at this point we could include this one because it's sort of related to the flow, but this will not be the part of this flow. And this actually covers the question asked by the Giovanni. So are you making the distinction between application events and domain events, or are you now just trying to figure out the domains now, DDD approach? Yeah, so the idea is that at this point we are thinking about I would say that in most cases we are thinking about the domain events. Of course, the email sent is clearly, let's say, from the submissions perspective, it's not something that maybe is domain related, but yeah, the general idea is that now we are discussing the domain events, and this will probably and hopefully will help us to determine the actually this helped us already to determine the submodules, the boundaries of particular modules, and the integration events, because I believe that this is what you mean by the application events. So the integration events between each of the module could be determined or defined during the design level, because it's now all about creating the flow. And at the design level, when we think about the technicalities, we can introduce maybe the integration events between the particular modules itself. So hopefully this will answer this question. Basically, we think the domain events.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So, we could probably dig out more of these events and subdomains, but I'm not sure if it makes much sense. I think we have the core ones, which were the most important.
Yeah, these two were not that. Actually, these three were not that obvious, because usually I think that it would end up with some sort of that
enum.
submission. Yeah, that enum or maybe the boolean saying that maybe I have the submission with some sort of flag that
Type.
says whether this is approved or not, and this actually makes more sense because we at the big picture we did not have this distinguished, right? At least not when it comes to talks, presentations. So I think that this makes sense when it comes to the division itself. So this is something that was not that clear, at least to me. We have this one. This is this board member thing. And actually, if we think about other stuff, we would already have the. I think that we had something related to files. Yeah, in here. So that will be another functionality that probably does not fit. Yeah, we could think about maybe this functionality would fit into the presentations, because I believe that it's like the presentation itself would have some dedicated files.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, yeah, but from the design point of view, it's like it would be cool to have some sort of dedicated thing for the files, some sort of blob or maybe CDN.
But it sounds like an external system or some just supporting domain, something that you can buy actually.
Yeah, but we are kind of hoping into the design level already. Yeah, but I think that even for now, it's quite a lot of things that could be developed, and something like, of course, we omitted the whole sale thing, so the sticker stalled and so forth. But of course, this could be some sort of external payment system, like we're discussing here. So we could put this on the design level, but for now, since we are making this for fun, I think that we'll basically omit this one. Not quite sure what to do with this board member thing. Because this functionality fits, to me, it fits more like to this one as a thing. It's like to me, it's like this. We have some sort of crew that belongs to particular conference, and they have like privileges for maybe accepting or rejecting the submissions as an actors, right?
Yeah.
So they will be able to do this thing, this too.
I would say so.
Yeah, I think this could be done, because as a functionality, this I wouldn't. Of course, we could think about some sort of dedicated thing, but if we think about the logical separation, and it's like the board member should not exist all without the conference, right? It's like it makes no sense to have board member without the conference. So even speaking about domain-driven design, I think that when it comes to ubiquitous language, it's like the board member would be. It's not like some other ubiquitous language that we need to create between those two. It's like we could share one language inside this thing. Let's call this bounded context for now. And to me, it's like something that we could put safely, at least for now, I think.
Okay.
Something in here. Oh, it's not the integral part. Okay. Giovanni says, "Yeah, I know that it's kind of dangerous to use the nonce should not be something that we should follow." And I do. We do our best to omit this. It's kind of hard because, as we mentioned, it's like we're not the event storming experts and so forth. And we more like. Maybe for now, for some short period, it was like we focus on the nouns, but I think that what it looks now, it's like especially during the previous session, we focus more on the verbs, actually. In this particular thing. Okay, let me just see. Shall we add some more? I'm not quite sure. Yeah, omitting the files for now, and there's the whole process of uploading. We could think, what processes do we have inside? So the process of whole, let's call this setup creation for the conference, is already in here, and we already can see that this will be, I think it's safe to say that this will be, in most general, this will be CRUD, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's even if we do have like something that does not contain this magic create create, read, update, delete word, I think that is pretty safe to say that this will be more or less CRUD-ish thing. The submissions, yeah, probably slightly the same. This will be like event based, probably. This one will be tricky, and I think that this will be a good thing, the good place to introduce the domain-driven design, and this will be quite straightforward too, I think. Okay, so I don't know, shall we move forward, or do we have something else to consider?
I think we should move forward to the, let's assume that this is partially completed, I would say.
It's like, yeah, I still have some consideration whether those two, like the talk and the presentation, it's like we could probably omit this talk especially, and think about the presentation itself. While the presentation would be based on the approved submission. But to me, it's like, if we think about the whole process of creating maybe not creating, but having the talk on the conference, it's like, I think that we should have the distinction between the submission, which could be basically rejected, could be trash, and the talk, which is already approved and could be, let's say, updated by the speaker or the host because we had some typos. And based on this, we'll create a presentation. And not necessarily the aggregate itself will have the whole details about the talk. It's like there's quite a lot of quite common situation in which the people put everything in the aggregate because they think that it's like it has to contain one-to-one representation of the something that we have in the reality, right? So I would put the speaker and everything in here, while the aggregate root, the aggregate itself will be nothing more but the boundary of the data that needs to be processed in one transaction. So it's like not necessarily we have to duplicate the data between those two. It could be the one responsible for the consistency of the data and the one responsible for keeping the data itself. It could be, yeah. There's some discussion. Should we use specific event names or more generic ones? Email sample. Yeah, I think that Zelu. Yeah, I think that we should follow the more general one. To me, this is more. Yeah, it's kind of specific because not necessarily we'll have to. We may have more than one notification channel, right? Not only the email. And it's the same like with the exactly same thing like we have with the microservices and so forth. We'd like to not create this sort of domain leaks and the coupling on the nouns. So yeah, that's a good point. I think that the notification is better, and of course in here we could have some different policies that will determine whether this will go directly to, let's say, I don't know, push notifications to the app, or maybe to via the email or something else. Yeah, so this is a good point. So that would be something like a notification, right?
Yep, notification.
Yeah, and okay, I can add some sort of policy in here. Maybe that will be also something needed. So notification. Not quite. I'm not quite sure whether this will be the policy itself. It's pretty hard to determine, but yeah, for now we could, because the policy, it's, yeah, let's leave it as a policy or some sort of rule. But for now, this will be more like, I don't know, strategy or something. But we'll see. Okay. So this is cool. Yeah. So this point, I think that we could move further.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Okay. Could you just set up the next level? I just want to read the
Sure.
comments. If you use verbs instead of nouns, you will your domains, everything will be more clear where the responsibility of each event should go. You have a talk service or presentation service, for example. I'm not quite sure whether I would agree with this one, that we would not end up with this. Because in this the original assumption about this one, that we didn't even have this one, right? That was something that came out once we discussed the whole process of submitting processing the submissions. So that was something that we asked during the previous session ourselves, whether we would like to have some sort of different snapshots. It's whether like one thing becomes another, and they have the life cycle is slightly different. Maybe some different operations could be attached to particular being, or is it just the same thing but maybe with like slightly different state? So to us, it's like the submission is completely different than the talk and the presentation, because the submission is like we send it, could be discarded, thrown away. So this is the first thing. The other thing is that we also distilled the whole process using this approach of alternative entry points to the process. So the process is that not necessarily you have to send the submission to have a talk on the conference. So it's like if you are a big star on the in our industry, you don't necessarily have to send a submission, right? So if you're, let's say, David Fowler, Scott Hanselman, you probably don't need to send the submission, because you'll be you just need to go to the conference and make a wish that you would like to have some great thing to talk about, let's say the .NET 5, and you don't need this thing completely to have a talk. So you have some sort of alternative entry point to your whole process, and this is also why we decided not to have the submission with just this artificial flag that most people would end up with, like, so the submission is approved or not. The same goes with the presentation. So I wouldn't say that I know what you mean, and as I said, it's not like I'm trying to think about what we are doing as a the state of art, because it's completely not the point. But I think that not necessarily we would end up with something completely different. But as I mentioned, we are just doing this our way, and we are not some like the event storming experts. There are a lot of, especially I mean, even in the Poland, a lot of more qualified guys for this type of stuff. So it's not like we're assuming that we are some sort of experts. Arkadiusz Piasecki, you forgot email sent to me.
Fix this one.
Oh yeah.
Good point.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. So shall we move forward?
Move to the next level. Yeah. The most interesting part, I think.
Yeah, it pretty much depends for whom, right? For whom the most it's like when it comes to design level, the whole idea is that we think about, I believe the submission accepted, pivot image opens, arrange now behaviors for submission accepted is a pivot event, wasn't it? Oh no, it was not. I don't know why the CFP was actually. Yeah, but for the it helped us the make the order for the events. But yeah, probably this will be more important one. Looking from this perspective. All right. So the idea about this, the design level is, of course, to think about how the particular modules in our case would look like, right? Mm-hmm. Actually, the module, I wouldn't say the module is, the module is kind of tricky, because it's like if you have like bounded context, thinking about the domain-driven design, not necessarily have to be one module, right? You could have like multiple modules that share the same ubiquitous language. But let's assume that it's like, for simplicity's sake, we do have like one module for each particular bounded context or whatever subdomain we do have in here, because we could think about this at this point. Yeah. So I will just use the noun module. So the idea is that we'd like to think about, let's call the shape of our particular modules in here, and there's a very popular picture, right? So the picture that explains almost everything. So how this would look like. So we have some sort of actor, and the actor sends some sort of command to aggregate, and I believe that in the Alberto Brandolini's book there was a suggestion not to name the aggregate too early, because maybe this will change your perspectives and how you would like to model in here. So there will be some sort of aggregate. The aggregate will accept the command, will produce some sort of domain event, and the user will have some read model being returned. Of course, at some point you also might have some sort of policies and external systems and DBs involved. But it's like, if we think about the typical stuff, even if on the previous YouTube series, or even on the microservices.net course that we published, it's like, it's pretty much the picture that explains almost everything, and I could agree at this point, right?
Yeah. So we are not going to use anything.
It's like, they already covered more. So this is the end of the stream. Thank you. No. So this is the idea about the design level. Now the question that remains, and honestly, I'm I would like to know your opinion if you are in any way experienced in the event storming, and maybe you've done some sessions at your companies. Is do you during the design level cover every individual module, or if something is I don't know how to call this, but it seems it's like at the very first glance it's trivial, right? It's like you have obvious CRUD. So do you still try to break down this during the design level, or you focus on something more tricky, or maybe something that was maybe covered with a lot of hotspots or something else? Because to me, it's like most of these modules on the design level would look more like the same. It's like we'll introduce some sort of aggregates, and the other question is that shall we really introduce the aggregate pattern in the CRUD, right? So do we really would like to have this into, let's say, this or this module, and maybe follow the clean architecture, while in most cases it's like it makes no sense, right? Because to me I think that we should focus on the something that is quite important, because to me, if we have like the commands like create conference, conference created, update conference, conference updated, it's quite obvious that we'll probably end up with the CRUD. And in these cases, when we for now, it's like when I see the trying to applying DDD in this case, to me it's like kind of weird thing. Yeah, it's overkill, and it sort of kills the idea about this one, right? About the domain-driven design in general, because it's like if there is actually no domain, there's just some sort of operation on the documents or entities or whatever you have in your database. I wouldn't say it makes much sense to apply the domain-driven design. So to me, it's like, Giovanni says, no, never do CRUD in DDD. Yeah, so we're not alone. So to me, the presentations is kind of tricky, and this is something that I would maybe at first glance I would focus.
Yeah, let's go with this one.
Yeah, and the thing is that actually bothers me is that at the very first glance, I can't think about one aggregate that could fulfill those two rules. And this is something that is kind of weird. And so once again, if you're new to domain-driven design and the whole thing, it's like typically when we speak about the domain-driven design, we have this concept of the aggregate, right? So the aggregate will basically guard the data within it that should be basically persisted or maybe processed in one transaction.
Yeah. So it's just your transactional boundary.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And once again, it's not like necessarily you have to put everything in there, because if the example with the presentation and the talk, it's maybe the presentation itself could have something like the talk ID instead of having the talk, the title, the agenda, and so forth. Maybe for the presentation being the aggregate, it's not necessarily important to have all this data, right? So it's not like the aggregate. The aggregate is rather the pattern. It's rather the pattern, not the actual representation of the reality that you could see, right? The subdomain is for the representation of the reality. The bounded context, not necessarily, and especially the aggregate root itself and the aggregates. So this is like the aggregate will guard our invariants and make sure that everything will be changed. Okay, we're making this already here, right?
Yeah.
So now what I think this is kind of tricky. It's like we have the presentations limit and participants limit rule and the participant conflict rule. So let's think about something hypothetical, right? So we could think about an aggregate, and I know that we should avoid the name of the aggregates. And we'll see what's the catch in here. Let me just read the comments. Maybe let me just display this one.
Yeah.
Geez. Okay. It's really hard to operate on the left hand. Try to identify the domains by functionality, then discuss each domain individually with concert business, but never all together, since each department. So Giovanni, if you could just write whether you are talking with each individual with the concerned business. So this happens after the process level. So you discuss it after the process level or during, because I believe that during the design level it's like no business involved. Okay. So it's like, okay, you model your methods on Aggregate with the operation names the business uses. Yeah, but during the I'm not quite sure. You model your methods on the Aggregate with the operation names the business uses, but I wouldn't say it always works on the design level, because the rule itself could be general, and it's like on the process level something may work, while on the design level this basically, when we think about the design itself and trying to put this into one particular aggregate, this might simply not work. Or maybe I don't get the comment. I'm not quite sure whether this applies to process or design level, because I truly think that on the process level there is no aggregate.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could add some more description, that would be helpful, because it's interesting, but I don't think I get everything. Okay, well, I think that maybe we could wait for the Giovanni for the response. Yeah. So in the meantime, it's like the thing oh Jesus, sorry.
It's a big one.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. What I think this is kind of tricky is that we have these two rules, right? So we have this participants limit rule, and we have this participant conflict rule. So assuming that we're breaking this rule that we should not name the aggregate too early, let's just do one, right? Jesus. So the one is the let's call this presentation, right?
Okay.
Let's say that we have this. We are sure that this will be the presentation, and that's because assuming that we'll have no, let's call this analysis, probably we'll end up with some sort of this one, right? So we have this participants limit rule. So my assumption is that, of course, we could think about some sort of list, right?
Yeah. So each presentation will have the list of the participants, so we can easily check, for example, the limit.
Yeah, and that's the invariant that we can protect with this aggregate, right? So it's like, once I want to add a participant to the presentation, this aggregate ensures that I basically could not add participants that the capacity of this set to this presentation. Of course, the aggregate itself could have some policy being injected inside, or maybe that would be handled by the domain service, whatever. But it's like this basically fits quite well when it comes to this first rule, right?
Yeah, but still, we have to also somehow fulfill the second rule here.
Yeah. So the second one is now tricky, because it's now.
I mean,
Now,
if you were to model a second aggregate, it would be like reverse presentation with participant, with the participant with list of the presentations, right? Given that there is like no rules, it will be either presentation with list of the participants or the participant with list of the presentations. So we could check either this rule or this rule, but it would be difficult to check both of them.
yeah, because with this sort of shape, it's like, yeah, now assuming that this is me and I will have a lot of different presentation, it's kind of hard to determine whether I have some conflict, right? Because I would have to create another call and check whether. Yeah, actually, this is more complicated because at the design level, there will be some sort of domain service that will be responsible for taking the actual presentation I would like to participate, and I don't know, getting the other presentations and ensuring that I am not signed into another one, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's like it's like it works at some point with the very first rule, and the other one is simply not that easy to handle, right? Of course, it could be, but it's not that easy.
It wouldn't be really effective.
Yeah. So the another option is that we could flip this. Right? We could think about the aggregate route will be now the participant, and the presentation will be something I participate for, right? So something like this one.
Yeah.
In this case, it works when it comes to determining whether I have some parallel sessions, because if the participant will have some sort of method on this one, like add presentation or participate presentation, right? It's quite easy to determine that, okay, sorry, but you're already attempting the presentation that is at the same slot, right? Or that starts at the same hour. But once again, it's like now it's pretty much hard to determine which participant, or maybe to determine the participant limit, right?
Yeah, so we cannot really fulfill easily the first rule, and we have some sort of issue there. Because it turns out as if we would have to sort of break this core principle and somehow, let's say, update the two aggregates in a single use case, right? To make it work somehow.
I would say more in like more transaction, to be more precise. Yeah.
Yeah, more transaction, right?
Yeah. So it's like yeah, I think that even if you would see I would say that it pretty much depends. It's like some if you would look for this topic on the Stack Overflow, it's like sometimes it pretty much happens, and I truly believe that even the great minds, I think even in Poland, sometimes they claim that they do some sort of stuff, right? Like this one.
Yep.
And that's simply because it would be pretty hard to fit and or maybe to find the aggregate that will handle those two things. And basically because it's like if you want to be both pragmatic and also you would like to have the code that it's quite efficient with its job, it's sometimes pretty hard to marry, right? The DDD and good practice with the performance. I think that especially guys from I think the .NETers, who do we really love? I think the .NETers will claim this one. That sometimes it's like the good looking code, it's not always the best one when it comes to performance. But the point is that it would be some sort of breaking the principle that you are updating the two aggregates into one transaction. And actually, there's also one more thing that is quite interesting in this one. So in this one, the presentation with the participant. Yeah, so we could think about this. If we see the, let's say, majority of the implementation when it comes to aggregate root, it's like we do have the aggregate root that has like the identifier, right? So the identifier, some sort of version,
the event.
Yeah, so some sort of domain events and so forth, and it's basically, but that's basically it. And the idea is that the aggregate itself will follow this optimistic locking, right? So if you're not familiar with the concept, it's like basically we'll get the current version of the aggregate with some sort of version. Let's claim that this will be the version, let's say 2, and once we update the state of our aggregate, we'll basically increment this version to 3. And the idea is that if some concurrent processes will be taken, and we'll have some sort of collision on the versions, we'll detect this one on the database level, right? So it's like I want to update only if the current version of my aggregate has, let's say, the version 2 and not higher, because if the version is higher, this means that someone in the meantime updated this to the newer state. I want to avoid the false update, right?
Yeah, so a lot of potential participants would see some sort of failure on their site. If they try to join the same presentation at the same time, they'll just start seeing the failures due to this version conflict.
That's a good point. So it's like in most cases we think about, so the aggregate will basically have some sort of version, and that's pretty much it. And we'll on the database level check the particular version, make sure that nothing was happening in the meantime, and if at some point this will occur, we'll basically discard the command, right? Maybe we'll reject this, and the user will have some sort of information that's sorry, but someone in the meantime basically change the state of something that you're already also updating. So if we think about this model, so the optimistic concurrency on the presentation, assuming that we have this participants list, it's kind of tricky, because it's like, what would happen if we have really great presentation and we have let's say that we have a really great speaker, right? And there is we could assume this thing with the stationary conference. So we have, let's say, the capacity for the seats that is equal to 100, and there's a lot of folks that would like to join this presentation at the same moment, right? So it's typical scenario during which you have people just waiting and tapping F5 or refreshing the page just to make sure that they can attempt the particular presentation. And at the same point, there's multiple calls to our app and to our aggregate, and it's like we are modifying the version of the local aggregate for each particular session, but on the database level, it's like every X number of transactions we basically fail because we have this collision on the version. So from the user experience, it's kind of annoying that we would have this is actually the aggregate that actually restricts the whole UX. Let's call this one, right. So the user experience will be poor, and just because we have this assumption that every single aggregate root needs to protect the version with the optimistic concurrency, right?
Yeah.
That would be something also that kills the spirit of the site. So we could think about some sort of relaxed optimistic concurrency. So the relaxed optimistic concurrency basically assumes that we have the version, but basically we can save
Not
the
all of the
data.
internal, yes, some internal changes don't really have to, for example, increment the version.
Yeah. Okay, let's check the comments in the meantime. There's quite a few. Zalu says updating to aggregates in one transaction as long as they are in the same bounded context is not the problematic. Pragmatics first. Yeah, I would agree. Giovanni said, "Oh, he responded." Okay, let me just see. Once you talk with each business in their language, you get back to architectural level and integrate each domain in the grand design. Yeah, okay. There's a tendency between presentation and participant. A tendency.
So for me, it sounds like sort of, I don't want to name it like a complex key aggregate, which means that there is, let's say the tendency would be your aggregate, as the Giovanni said in the one of the next comments. And then in your aggregate, you keep a reference to, let's say, your presentation ID and participant ID, from what I understood. But even if that would be our aggregate, we still have the issue with fulfilling the first rule, which is the limit rule, I guess.
Wait. So the tendency between a presentation and the participant. So it's like you have the. So I'm not quite sure whether this is something that you mentioned. So some sort of the key would be some sort of mixing between the presentation ID, the presentation itself, and the participant. I'm not quite sure how this would.
We would still have to keep, for example, the time to actually fulfill the second rule. But I'm not sure about the first rule. If we kept something like a limit within this aggregate as some just sort of value type, would it help?
To me, the attendance itself is some sort of matrix. So on the one side you have the participant, on the other you have the presentation.
Okay.
So now it's like this particular participant will attend to this presentations. Keeps track of the count. The attendance keeps track of the count.
Okay.
But count of the participants of the particular session or presentation.
Or it's just some sort of, let's say, int participants count that gets atomically incremented. Not sure. But still,
I'm not quite sure either. A tendency keeps track of that count. So the count. Let me just think about this one. So we have the attendancy in here. And in this, keeps track of all that count. Wait. That's kind of interesting. Think about the mixing, right? So something like this. And we think about the situation in which we want to attend to particular session, right? So we have some sort of command. Why this sticker is so huge? I'm not quite sure.
Me either.
Yeah. Okay, so presentation. So in here, I would have what I would have
presentation ID most likely and the participants list.
But this does not fulfill the second rule.
Yeah.
Because
we still don't know if there's a conflict.
Because this could be the attendance of the participant for the conference, right? Something like Giovanni responded, the attendance has a ref to presentation, the participant, and the overflow room, for instance. So this will be the aggregate root, basically. So as far as I get, right? So that will be so the idea is that the attendance has a ref to presentation, the participant, and the overflow room, for instance. The count rule is just grouped by on the presentation. I mean, that I like the idea in here that we could think about. So it's like the rules you have are part of the main service where aggregates work together. Yeah, but to me, it's like still if the I would not agree with this that the rules are not part of the aggregate in this. So those are called domain service, but the domain service is used when you have to perform something outside of your boundaries, right? Or the boundary of the particular aggregate. And to me, if we have something like that we have the rule that says that the presentation has some sort of limit. So to me, it's like it pretty much depends on the shape of the particular aggregate, right? It's pretty much too hard about the domain service if you don't have the shape of the aggregate, because I don't know whether this will go outside of my boundaries or not. So the idea about, I don't know, the very simple idea of domain service could be like take two aggregates, take property C and add them together, return the right. So it's like one aggregate is not aware of the fact that there is another aggregate. So we would like to have some sort of orchestrator that would basically take one, take another one, gets the properties, sum them up, and return. So to me, this is the domain service that basically is outside of the scope of one particular aggregate. But in here, it's not like the rule itself to me, it's some sort of leak. If you want to put the domain rule into the domain service, it's like maybe to me it's some sort of leakage.
Yeah, I mean
That
the aggregate has to protect this invariant.
you need to orchestrate this on the domain service and then it's like the aggregate itself. I'm not quite sure, but it looks like in this case the aggregate would not be responsible for protecting the invariants or something. It's like once we pass the domain service level, we assume that everything is fine.
Yeah, so it would mean that we could have the aggregate in, let's say, invalid state because it's not protecting its boundaries invariant. So, yeah.
I'm still kind of confused with this concept. How this would help us, because to me there are tendencies sort of I'm not quite sure how we would combine these two, because I can be attendant on many presentations, right? So we could think about sort of participant that is attending to many presentations.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, I'm not quite sure how I could manage the fact that I have the presentation attendance limit. It's like in this case that would be something like the domain service is responsible for checking. So this would be like something like I need to get my attendancy and then check whether the attendancy for other participants basically aims for the same presentation, and sum this up and determine whether, and go through some sort of policy, because we may have some maybe overbooking policy or something else, and think about the result, right? So in this case, okay, let's see. Attendance aggregate is created from presentations, participants lists. There are separate aggregates that you orchestrate in a domain service. Okay, so that's so that's what the Giovanni meant.
Okay.
But it's still like so at this point, I'm not quite sure what's the point of doing the third aggregate, to be honest. Because this is something that I mean, okay, I get the idea. Because I believe that the outcome is that we would have some sort of domain service for the attendances, and this one would basically target the those two and put this into attendancy, right?
Yeah, so based on this rule checks and presentation participant, you would produce the attendancy as the outcome aggregate from these two.
But to me, it's then like artificially creating the orchestration on the domain level. Could you just specify whether you would like to put this can keep track of state, overall rooms, locations? Yeah, but the third aggregate. So we have the assumption that we have like now three aggregates. So we would have the participants presentation and the attendancy, and this would be the can keep track like state, overflow, rooms, etc. locations. To me, honestly, it makes no sense, and that's basically because at the application level, we could create a projection that would create some sort of read model based on the domain events that we produce in here. So the domain events will be translated to integration events in here. So I would take the domain event, produce the integration event, and speaking about, especially in the CQRS, we could create the projection more or less that would basically create, generate, and update the read model that would take the data from the talks, so the title, the agenda, the speaker details, and so forth, and basically update this with the participant details. And to me, this will. I don't see the point of doing the third aggregate. Or I'm missing something, because if we speak about keeping the state of the overall shape of the presentation, so what's the title and so forth, I wouldn't say this is completely beyond the presentation scope and the aggregate scope. The aggregate doesn't care whether my title is X or Y. It's like I don't care. I would like to know the identifier for this and make sure that there's some number of the participants for this particular presentation. And the presentation would have some sort of like talk ID, and that's it pretty much. So the talk ID would be one thing and the list of the participants. And in here I would have the participant identifier with the list of the presentations. And that's it. And I don't care about the other stuff. And based on the domain events, I would produce the maybe integration event and create a projection as some sort of read model that would be composed completely beyond the domain layer. But I don't know whether I get the whether I get the idea. Hmm.
Okay, so maybe let's go with our first assumption. And
let me just attendance aggregate once created. The participants can give attendance to. Wait, what? I need to see. Attendance aggregate once created, the participants can give attendance to attendance aggregate, which records it and runs attendance rules. But it's still like
you still cannot track the actual participants, what they are participating. You still cannot track this conflict rule in here.
but I'm not even bothering with this one, but I'm not quite sure why having the attendance aggregate is something, because it's like attendance aggregate once created, then participants can give attendance to. But it's like still you have the operation between multiple aggregates, so it still broke this principle. I'm not quite sure whether I missed this, or it's like Giovanni commented that your rules involve multiple aggregates, so you cannot enforce them in one or the another. Yeah, so we are not. I think that we're not doing. It's like each of them has its place. I'm still not quite sure how this might look like. How this could combine those two, or orchestrate this.
Well, another question, if you make a conference day as an aggregate, you will still have the same issue with the optimistic locking. If you start updating the version after each user wants to participate, you'll have the same issue. And there will be a really huge aggregate. So you don't really care in aggregate what are the other participants doing, pretty much. So
I think
this would be huge.
I think that this could be too general, and I think that when it comes to, the relaxed optimistic concurrency, there is also one thing, and I think that at this point I should mention that was I discussed this problem with the friend of mine, my colleague Daniel. So I just saying this because I know that he would be mad if I would not mention his name. And yeah, because the potential issue that you might have in here is, assuming that you have the optimistic locking, is that maybe not the relaxed optimistic locking, is that we could think about the situation in which we have the presentation with the capacity, let's say 100, right? So something like this one. Let's say that the capacity is like 100. And at this point, we have some sort of invariant, right? So this could be like the property, or maybe some the policy being injected into the aggregate. So depending on the type of the presentation, whether this is the online presentation on the stationary presentation, this could be either unlimited or some limited seat policy. So the idea is that assuming that we have this limited, so we have the stationary presentation, and we have this list with the participants, that could not be an issue, because we might have a situation in which we have this relaxed optimistic concurrency, and let's say we have like 99 seats left, and at the very end we have some sort of parallel requests, and we add one and another one also, right? Because in memory they check the policy, and both passed because they had like 99 was taken, one's left. So basically, yeah, we're allowing this, and we have like 101 over the 100, right? So we have some sort of implicit overbooking policy in here, right? So the question now is, this is more like the I would say the business decision, is that whether the overbooking actually bothers us. And I know that the overbooking is quite popular, especially when it comes to flights, right? And the whole traveling, because the traveling companies, especially some, they have this assumption that basically you will not, let's say that the 10% or 5% of the travelers will not attempt, so they can basically they're fine with the overbooking. So let's say I have like 100 seats and I can sell like 105. It's fine. So in this case, this would not bother us that much, right? Even if we would have some sort of policy being injected in the presentation. But the cool idea also, and this is the implication of the fact that the adding to the collection always works, right? So it's like if I'm adding something, let's say, to the MongoDB document, this will always succeed, right?
Yeah, it will be atomic, it will always succeed.
Yeah. So if you would like to make this more restrict, you could think about something different. So you could make the mechanism that will remove instead of add, because the removing not always succeed. So the idea is that you could think about the presentation that has some sort of slots. So the slot will have the presentation ID
and some sort of unique ID,
probably. Or maybe the ticket. Ticket will be the better. So the ticket will be the particular ticket for the particular presentation, right? And the ticket would have some sort of presentation ID. So the cool thing is that in here, assuming that I would like to have the participant that would attempt the presentation, it's like I could take the ticket, and of course on the design level, this needs to be also you should think about this one, because you cannot basically take first, because you would have the collision. So maybe some sort of
ticket, whatever.
First of all, and GUID, the best ordering in the .NET. I'm kidding, but it's like you take the random ticket, you remove this, and you put this into the participant. So participant, based on the ticket and the information inside, could determine whether I have the collision on the presentation slot, so whether I have the parallel presentation, and the presentation knows about the capacity, right? So it's not like I cannot basically came up with some sort of overbooking. It's like I remove this, and once I'm out of the tickets, I basically cannot proceed forward, right? It's like I'm done with this approach. There is, assuming that we have the relaxed optimistic concurrency, we'll have the implicit overbooking policy. Even though the policy will not be injected into the presentation, there still might be a chance that if we have really hot presentation, we'll have some overbooking being involved in here. Okay. So the question from the Krzysztof, could a participant exist not yet assigned to a presentation? Yes, the assumption was that participant is the instance of the user per particular conference. So you could be
ticket.
So so this rule, like the participant conflict rule, so you don't have you cannot attend to multiple power sessions, is works only within the conference scope. So if you are attending, let's say, 3 conferences at the same day, we don't care if you have the another session at the same time at the another conference, because you are a completely different participant for us, right? So the assumption was that the participant is some sort of local instance of you at the particular conference. Don't get this one. That would still require distributed transaction between aggregates, which is not required IMO. Which one? Because I
think taking the tickets, or we still have to involve aggregates, but
it's not distributed, because this is within the same bounded context and within the same process actually, and even the thread. So I wouldn't say it's like the distributed transaction at all, because this still can be rollbacked normally. Or this applies to something else. But for sure, it's not distributed. But it's... I'm not quite sure, though. We can let the communicating to participants later. We can look at the communicating participants later. They are overflow. Yeah, and this is actually also, I would say, the good point. It's like because we assume that this rule, so the participants limit rule. I could put some sort of hotspotting here, right? So this applies only online conferences live. Something like if the conference is not online, and of course we could think about the situation in which we have the online conference with the limited seats. That would be weird. But maybe if we want to create this more premium. Maybe I will change this one. Okay. Maybe something like maybe something more general, and to make this true. So I think that we could think about checking this conflict rule first, and at some point we could at the second point we could think about this one, right? Because if we have the online conference, this might not even bother us.
Yeah, so then we're just updating one aggregate, and this is fine.
Yeah, of course we could think about some sort of we could think about some eventual consistency in here between those two. But if this is not, I would say that this is not a great design, because if this is fulfilled, this is not, and we have some eventual consistency. Let's say, assuming that we have the integration event or something, it's kind of messy. Because if this is not fulfilled, we should roll back this. And of course, assuming that we are still in the one process, because this will be in a monolith, it's not that big issue, because at some point we could add the decorator with the transactional boundaries, right? So even though the both aggregates don't know about each other, we would add the transactional boundary on the design level. But it's something that we could discuss. Yeah, I think that this would be something like this, right?
I agree. Okay.
I think that we should discuss. I think that it's like something that we could think about. To me, it's like I don't get this,
but we'll sleep with it for sure.
I mean, I know how this would make this more fancy, but being pragmatic, I don't see it's something better than having those two, just those two. But it's like at this point I don't see this. I do my best, but maybe this is I don't know. But for now I basically cannot see the advantage of having this over just those two. This will probably not work for us. Maybe I will put it this way. This would work well if we would really care about the overbooking, and since we could allow this, we'll probably stick to this one. It's more expressive, I would say, more clear, especially for the maintenance. And I would favor this aggregate over this, because this might not always be checked. I mean, it would turn that the process will be the same, but it's like the presentation might have some policy injected, and the policy would basically answer always, let's say, true, right? So it's like, can I add one more participant? Like, true. And this is basically because we have the online conference and we have no limit. So this could be favored, right?
Yeah.
Attendance aggregate, which tasks attendance commands from participants they will attend. What? I have no clue. What's the tendency aggregate? Which tasks? attendance. Wait. And evaluate all attendance rule. Okay. But this will still that takes attendance commands from participants. So by participants and okay. So the attendance. Okay. But it's still and later evaluate all attendance rule. But it's I'm not quite sure whether you mean this will be processed in one transaction, because this could for sure be. I still believe that this yours approach would behave like this one, because the attendance basically would take the participant will that they want to attend to particular presentation, and that would check the capacity, right? To me it looks like
Yes.
this concept but named differently. But I'm sorry, I don't know whether this what exactly do you mean? Krzysztof also have some question. What do you think about breaking the presentation into two modules, stationary presentation and online presentation? To be honest, I don't wait. I don't see a lot of benefits. It's like to me, it's like the presentation could have some, as I mentioned, it's like what I see. It's like some sort of policy that could be injected or handled on some domain level. Domain service level. So I would see like the presentation could have something like capacity. Capacity is like this, right? And we could think about something like attend to presentation or participate. And basically the capacity policy would answer the question, can I add this participant to my list? And the capacity underneath would have a different strategy for the stationary presentation or the online presentation or some other presentation. So let's say for the online presentation, the answer will be always yes. Yes, you can add this one. And for the stationary capacity, this may look into maybe the conference or maybe some sort of external data and check what's the capacity for the particular conference room, right? And it's like 100. So sorry, but we already have like 100, so you cannot add this one. So I wouldn't say it makes a lot of sense, because the logic itself is still the same. It's just the matter of this capacity, and it's not always checked. I mean, it will be always checked, but it's sometimes it will be quite a naive implementation. I think that since we already hit like 2 hours of this discussion, I think that we could rethink about this one.
Yeah, well, for sure. Yeah, think about this attendancy, just to get a better understanding of what you meant with your comments, because maybe we are not getting everything you meant. Because it would be great to have all of these rules under the single Aggregate, but for now we just can't see if it's possible. Maybe we are missing something.
Yeah, because for now I don't see the advantage of this. Okay. Online presentation do have limits. I would not agree. It's like the business decides whether we have the limits. Of course, I'm joking, but it's like we might have different assumptions depending on the type of the conference. And
usually I would say the workshops do have limits, but online talks usually they don't have limits.
yeah,
But
assuming
again,
that
it can be simple policy. So
yeah, assuming that we rely on the YouTube as a streaming platform, it's like I could throw like 5,000 people on the one presentation. I don't care about this one because I know that they will handle this probably. But it's like, yeah, it's a I'm joking. It's a good point, and of course it's like we honestly we don't have we don't know yet, but I think that just for the some sort of example, we could have this assumption that yeah, if we think about the online conferences, we could have different thresholds or the limits than the stationary ones, right? All right, so for now, let's just we need to think about this one. I'm not I'm not that confident about this one. Probably we'll finish this at the very end. Sorry, at the very beginning of the next live, and we could start thinking about this one because to me, this is way to go. It's like, to be honest, it's like this is how would I would do this. Is the easiest one. It's not the cleanest because it breaks the principle for having two aggregates being updated at the same transaction. But it's like it works. It's the most expressive, and to me, a tendency. At this point I don't get the idea about this one because to me it behaves like some sort of orchestrator of these two. I don't see the advantage of having this. But yeah, but we need to think about this one. It's not like we are throwing this, right?
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the discussion on the chat, especially by the Giovanni, which helped. Yeah, and put a lot of great comments. Okay, so I think that this is pretty much it, right? It's like we could. I think that we can safely come back to this during the next live, and hopefully we'll finish this one because the other is, I believe, it's quite straightforward at the very first glance. We could of course check this, but this is something quite controversial, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. All right, so I think that at this point we should also sorry, maybe just one more comment. So that will be the last comment, okay? That'll be fair. Okay, so let's just tendency aggregate price of presentation and conference participants list, expose behavior to take attendance from participants, then later evaluate attendance rules.
But still, it boils down to actually sending potentially to these users, hey, sorry, you cannot attend this presentation because maybe you are over the limit, right? If we follow this path.
I mean, I okay, at the ubiquitous language level, I do get the idea about the attendancy. It's like it makes sense. But on the design level, I'm not quite sure whether this actually works better than those two. It's like I don't know. Yeah, but it's like, yeah, we just need to figure this out.
Yep.
And we'll see. Okay, shall we finish this?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. So quite a few discussions. I'm pretty. I wouldn't say I'm happy about the outcome, but it's like, yeah, there were quite few interesting discussions. this attendancy is something that I need to think about. Maybe I'm too dumb to understand this at this point. Hopefully I will get this idea before the next live. So yeah, as a tradition, I try to avoid this expression. Yeah, but let's say that as a tradition, because it's our which one? Third live? Yeah, third.
Yeah, third one.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll get the licenses for any online course that we have. So I think that's pretty safe to say that the Giovanni is the first one,
Yep.
and the sheet, I'm sorry if I pronounce this poorly, would be the second one. So if you're interested in the microservices.net or any other course that will publish, just write to us and we'll give you the license. And thank you very much, guys, for putting quite a lot of interesting comments on the chat, because it's quite inspiring. And yeah, I think that this is it. I'm not quite sure when do we so the next week is like the one before the Christmas Eve.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe we'll manage to get it done next week. We'll see.
Yeah, maybe. This one is also interesting.
Yeah,
not quite sure. So this is Wednesday, by the way. Yeah, we are doing this every Wednesday. So yeah, so maybe hopefully we'll manage to make the live next Wednesday, or maybe at the very end of the year in here. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll let you know for the email and social media for sure.
Yeah. So this is it when it comes to third episode of this longish introduction to doing this whole system. And once again, thanks everyone for attending. Thank you, especially the winners, today's winners, for such an active conversation. And hopefully we'll see you next week. And hopefully we'll give you the answer about the design level that we came up with. So thank you and see you.